Okay. Okay, can everyone see this properly? Okay. So hi everyone, welcome. Thank you guys all so much for coming. So this is a resume workshop part 1. So this is part of a 3-part resume workshop series that me and Alistair are going to be doing. So I'm Anna. I'm currently a second-year data science major. I'm a professional development event director here at ACM, and I'll be presenting this workshop with Alistair.
Hi, I'm Alistair. I'm a 4th-year computer science and linguistics major. I'm actually a social event director by day, but my other hat is that I roast resumes in the Resume Roast channel pretty often, so that's why I am here.
So today we're going to be covering what are these workshops for, why you should attend them, who should attend these workshops, and why they would be beneficial for you. And then next we're going to be going over what a resume is for and why you need a resume. And then we're also going to be talking about what's unique about CS resumes as opposed to resumes that you're submitting for other professions. And then what you should know, what you should show in your resume to make you stand out from other applicants and get the job that you want.
So who's this for? Well, it's for everyone, you know. ACM, we are somewhat a CS and CS adjacent fields focused org. And this is primarily around that. But the principles that we're going to talk about today apply to, you know, any job that you're trying to get, no matter what field. So stick around. These workshops will be helpful to everyone, but they are tailored especially for people trying to get SWE jobs or, you know, PM, designer, things that are adjacent to SWE. By the way, before we forget, remember to check in. The check-in code is down there. Yeah.
Okay, so next, what is a resume anyways? So basically a resume is a concise summary of who you are and what you've done that's relevant to the position that you're applying for. A resume basically shows recruiters what your skills are and why they should hire you over someone else and what you can bring to the position. And it basically demonstrates consideration and that like you can move on to further rounds in the future. If you're unmuted, could you please mute yourself? Thank you.
And you know, the reason to make a resume is that this is your first impression. You know, often it's the case that if you're like in the hiring rounds for something or in an interview process, a resume screen is going to be the first round. So a resume is your chance to make a good first impression and then consolidate everything relevant about you into one single document that people can consult. Instead of having to, you know, spend an hour getting to know you, you can just show all of that as best as you can up front and show furthermore that you are a good fit for whatever it is that you're applying for. Showcase what portion of your skills are best suited to that position and, you know, move on.
So next, who's your audience? Who are you writing your resume? Who's going to be reading these? So if you're applying for internships, usually it's going to be recruiters or other engineers who are reading your resume. So just know that they will have some technical knowledge and they'll be able to understand for the most part what is like all the technical stuff on your resume. And if you're applying for research or other student orgs, they would probably be professors or researchers, lab assistants, or people in student orgs that are actually reading your resume. So it's a slightly different audience depending on the job or whatever position you're applying for. But the bottom line is to create a resume that shows who you are as a person and shows that you have the relevant skills necessary to succeed in the position you're applying for. You're muted, Alistair.
Sorry, I've done this for long enough. Anyways, this is most relevant in the case of people like recruiters or engineers at companies who are reading your resume. They will read it very quickly. Generally speaking, when you're hiring for internships and new grad positions and things like that, you have a lot of resumes to get through, which is why that step is first before interviews and things. So recruiters will skim rather than read thoroughly, and they will scan for things that look cool and good. So the common, the piece of folk wisdom is that recruiters read your resume in an average of 6 seconds. And while that may or may not be more or less true, you should think of that as the case. You should be looking at your resume through a 6-second snapshot. What can you see in a brief glance that will immediately show good things? What will immediately set you apart in the first glance at your resume? And how can you make sure that you get to the second glance and then maybe farther on, a full reading for the rounds in the interview process? You've got to make sure that the first 6 seconds is a good 6 seconds.
And so how should you go about even making a resume? So there are several formats or different ways that you could make a resume. None of these are better, or I would say like better than the other ones, but there are a lot of different tools you could use, like Word, Google Doc, Photoshop, Figma. Kind of just choose a tool that you think you like vibe with the most, or you want to use as your resume builder. There's like no right or wrong answer, but just make it like choose whichever one that you would feel most comfortable with making it with, and you could begin making a resume through that. So I personally just use a Google Doc, and then I use a resume template from that. But I know a lot of different people use different tools. So Alistair, if you want to talk a little bit about what you use.
I use LaTeX, which is like a markup language, which you will probably use in some classes for some points at proofs if you have not already done this. But I think LaTeX is one of the easier ways to start looking pretty by default. And looking pretty is actually pretty important. Next slide, please. Being pretty kind of matters, you will be judged primarily on the content in your resume, but it depends, like if your resume is badly formatted, it's badly designed in ways such that it's hard to read, or it's hard to determine what's meant to be important, or it's just hard to extract information from it, then that will be something which is both not pretty and it will be bad for your chances, So in general, if you have a pretty resume, then that means that you have good design principles that are going along with it. And if you have good design principles, then you have a good presentation of information. So you should really be thinking about this from the perspective of someone who hasn't seen it before. And in this situation, being pretty is going to draw more attention than not being pretty. It's also the case that if you're applying for like design roles or maybe front ends, then you should be more conscious of this. Sometimes people will go very far and do things like make a resume which looks like the UI of the website that they're applying to be a designer for. There's no need to do that. But if you're applying for a role where making pretty things is important, then you should definitely make sure that your resume is pretty, because that is important. And this actually might be one reason why you might want to use something like Figma to make a resume, because it might be easier to do it in that situation.
So what should you even show on a resume? So on a very like high level overview, you could definitely list any technical skills that you know, or any languages, anything that that would be beneficial or relevant to the job that you're applying for. You could also show interpersonal skills or soft skills that you have, like if you take an initiative, or you have like commitment, you have passion, you have curiosity about like, I don't know, computer science or something. Definitely show these in your resume. But an important thing to note is that you should show, not tell. Don't directly state, especially for soft skills, don't directly say that, oh, I have good communication skills, I have good teamwork skills. Try to highlight these throughout your resume in your bullet points or in your descriptions of the like experiences that you have. So show that you have leadership, show that you have good teamwork skills, maybe by describing how you worked in a team to solve a problem or something. This would go stronger than if you just simply say that you have good teamwork skills. So that's just something to keep in mind as you build a resume.
And the ways that you do show these are through all of the things that you've done. On some level, a resume is a list of things you've done, and then the ways that those translate to good skills that you want to show. So those are the good skills you want to show, and these are the ways that you show them. One of the ways is work experience. This might be from internships if you've had internships, but don't worry, you don't have to have had internships to get more internships. Any job will show good things, pretty much. So don't be ashamed of what you have done, because it shows who you are, and that's something you do want to show. So, through work experience, you can show all kinds of interpersonal skills, no matter what you've been doing, and then technical skills, depending on what the nature of the work was. Projects are another good way to show technical skills, especially personal projects. You can focus pretty hard on technical stuff because, in a personal project, you can basically do whatever you want. And that means you can learn whatever technologies you want to use or whatever techniques, and work goes into a project that you can then showcase on your resume or in a portfolio. And that can show, lots of technical maturity. School projects as well, although they do tend to be a lot more, constrained in scope, they can show good qualities of working in a team, which are, underrated skills, very important. And those are things that you may very well want to show as well. Other things that you might want on there are research experience, which can do similarly technical or interpersonal skills, student organization involvement and leadership, whether that's technical or non-technical. Again, all of it's good. All of it shows things that you want to show. And, we're all unique. We all have had different experiences, and many of those experiences will show good things about you. So feel free to showcase anything that's particularly unique, any awards you've done, or you've gotten any hackathons you've participated in, things like that are genuinely valuable. And long as you can pitch them into terms of things that you've learned and skills that you have based on them, those are things which show good stuff.
And so the bottom line or golden rule that you should always remember as you're writing up or drafting your resume is to maximize the amount of impressiveness while also minimizing the amount of space used. So if you don't know already, your resume should only be 1 page max as a general rule of thumb. And basically in that 1 page, you're trying to pack as much information about yourself and trying to convince the recruiter that your skills, and you're basically trying to convince the recruiter that they need to hire you, basically. So you're trying to pack as much as you can inside that 1 page. So it's really important to use every bit of white space that you can to just describe your experiences and to list out anything that you think would be beneficial to, or that would be relevant to the job that you're applying for.
Yeah, and then corollaries of this, you're trying to maximize impressiveness and minimize space. And this means that you can cut down on a lot of things. You don't really want to waste space saying things which don't show anything. You don't want to waste space on formatting, which doesn't help your presentation of information. You don't want to waste space on words that don't really mean anything, It's okay to be ungrammatical in some ways, as to make sure that you're concise. Being concise and being readable are the ways that people are going to extract information from you. So you want to make sure that you're not wasting any space. It's also important that you don't have too much stuff. If you're writing a novel in 3-point text on 1 page of your resume, then nobody's going to read that. And it's just not going to be a good use of your effort. So you should, trim until you have the fewest words that you can have that demonstrate as much good things about you as possible. And that's, what you should be taking away from the golden rule.
And finally, like homework or anything, if you want to call it this is totally optional. We would advise you to try to write a resume, try to draft up an initial draft of your resume. This is a 3-part workshop series. This is only the first part, but in workshop number 2, we're going to be talking about the nitty-gritties of how to build a resume, the structure and how to write bullet points, what you actually need to put as content on your resume. So we're going to be going over all that in the second resume workshop. So don't worry about being perfect. But we would advise you to just draft up a resume, draft up just an initial first draft, and have somebody so that we could you kind of build on that in the second workshop.
Yeah, and if I just want to say something more about that, lots of people have hangups about just making something. So I urge you, just make something. The first step is the hardest step. Just come up with some stuff, put it on paper, and we can look at it later.
Yeah, just to add on to that, your resume is always a work in progress. So don't worry about just trying to be perfect or trying to make it as good as possible in your first draft. Don't get too attached or anything because you're going to end up changing it a million times. I already have, I don't know, more than 20 versions of my resume. So just know that will always change.
I've been continuously updating mine for years. It's the kind of thing that you can put as much time as you want to into. So just put a little bit of time, make something, and then we will work on it together. All right. So that concludes the we're talking at you phase. So we can take questions at this point, either verbally or through Zoom chat. Would prefer that they're kind of about the content of the presentation because in workshop part 2, we're going to go over some more detailed bits, but anything's welcome. So go ahead, ask away, folks. Not all at once, though. All right, Joshua asks, university emails, are they our greatest resource? Would you recommend having that listed instead of personal? I would not say that your email address is the most impressive thing about you. If your email address is the most impressive thing about you, then I think honestly, you should come up with more substantial things to talk about than that. I don't think it can hurt. You can definitely use it, but there are a couple things to be aware of. One is that, actually, I don't think this is true anymore. It used to be that your UCSD email expired after you graduated. So if you had that on file with the company and you've graduated, they wouldn't be able to contact you anymore. I don't think that's true anymore, but there is, I think there's some kind of archival thing. So that might be an issue with that.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I personally use my regular personal email. I put that on my resume just because I'll always have that email no matter what, no matter if I graduate or anything, because I'm not too sure how your school email works after you graduate. But just a note that if you do use a personal email, make sure that it's professional. It's not weird or anything, because that would look bad on you if it was not that good.
Definitely. And similarly, if you really want to be fancy, you can host your own domain and you can put your personal email on that, but honestly, not really necessary. And I don't think it matters too much.
Okay, I think there's another question in the chat. Should we have an objective statement in our resumes? If so, should we be changing it for every application? So I think I personally do not have an objective statement, just because I feel like I'm mostly applying for if I'm applying for this role, they should know that you're applying for that role and you want that role. So I think it would be kind of redundant to just put an objective statement, because if you're applying, you basically want that role. So I personally don't include an objective statement, but if you really want to, I don't think it's too bad if you want to add on to that, Alistair.
Yeah, it might be useful in some specialized scenarios, like maybe if you're applying to so it's generally seen as more of an old-fashioned company thing to do, and maybe a big company thing to do. So if you're applying to a company that specifically asks for an objective statement, you should have it. Maybe if you're cold applying to a resume position, to someone who doesn't know to a research position, to someone who doesn't know anything about you, that might be valuable. But in that case, I would really try to put that information somewhere other than the resume, a cover letter or introductory email. I agree with Anna. I don't think there's a ton of situations where it adds a lot What I have seen some people do is they put like a little summary section up top instead, which is some cool stuff that they've done. That's an option. Again, though, it's not entirely clear whether that adds anything more to already having that information in a different place. And these things take up space. You should always be weighing the amount of space that you take up versus the amount of impressiveness that you'll get from it.
And then Nishant asked, when should we start removing old stuff? I would say anything within a year or two is okay to include, or anything that's like really relevant to your position. So for example, maybe you had an internship 2 years ago and then it was like a software engineering internship and you're applying for software engineering roles. I think it's fine to keep it on there if that's your most recent experience. But as soon as you get like newer experience, definitely prioritize those over the older ones. But I don't think, as long as you aren't putting like high school stuff, if you're an upperclassman, don't include high school stuff on your resume. But after that, I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think it just kind of depends on what category of thing this is. Like if you had, I don't know, a part-time job in high school, that's probably going to be much more illuminating than, I got my high school diploma. So the impressiveness of different things does change based on age, but some of them faster than others. The fact that you graduate from high school gets less impressive pretty quickly in college. So I'd recommend moving that pretty fast, but some other things maybe not so fast. All depends. I think this question's for you.
We're not gonna go over cover letters because this is a 3-part resume workshop. So these are just primarily geared towards building your resume, but we do have a cover letter workshop in week 6 or 7, I believe. So it's not part of this series, but we will have one as part of like ACM. Anyone else have any questions?
Alrighty. I guess if we're not gonna have anything more.
Yeah, if there are no more questions, you guys are free to go since the presentation's over. But if you guys have any questions that you feel more comfortable asking in a smaller setting, you could stick around and we can get to them.
Also, always feel free to, ask the server. There's a resume channel where you can ask any kinds of questions you might have afterwards. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.
Live resume review?